Okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, I normally I would just speak spontaneously, um, but I'm feeling like disoriented. I think that's a good word to describe. And so earlier, uh, and the reason why was speaking tonight was because it was like a last minute thing, and we can pivot. So I kind of jump on board. Um, So please remember if you are willing, reach out to me if you want to volunteer to give a talk. That would be helpful. Um, yeah, I just want to um, I thought about what to talk about, and I for me I notice when we talk about Buddhism, when we talk about practices, we tend to emphasize more on the aspect of practice, which is mindfulness and meditation. Uh, and we don't touch much on the moral aspect of Buddhism. If we look at the Eightfold Path, for instance, as the Buddha taught, is important as a foundation that we practice Sila, right, which is moral conduct. And what no, Sheila, the practice of moral conduct become very apparent to me during my time of incarceration. Um, I think I can speak for most of us. Uh, when we find ourselves in confinement, uh, the first thing a lot of us start thinking about, what did we do wrong? The concept of right and wrong is, um, very prevalent in our mind. And and also the sin of guilt and shame. These are the emotion and the concept, the thought process that come up a lot for a person that is in confinement. And when I first encountered Buddhism, uh, the practice of precept sound boring to me. I was more attracted to the practice of wisdom, the practice of meditation, mindfulness. Those things sound more attractive to me than the practice of the precept. But I realize how important precept is, and I remember when I first started meditating, I realized there was a lot of things lie dormant within me that I didn't want to deal with surface, and a lot of that is just I have a very distorted concept of moral or ethical practice, and I never really understood, really look at that. And later on in my life, I found it very important that we really look at, our moral and ethic. Uh, and when I was going to college, and I think this probably bring everybody back to their time in college, everyone kind of have to take ethic class. I love that class. I did really well in that class because it got me thinking. A lot of the guy didn't like it, but I really enjoyed that class, and I thought about it often. So I did some research, and what I want to talk about today is the subject of ethic and moral. So I'm going to do some reading here. Um, just so the definition: ethic or rule that guide behavior, while moral or a person's internal sense of right and wrong. Ethic are often based on community standard, while moral are based on personal belief. I didn't know that. I didn't know that my behavior, the action that I'm taking, is it based on an ethical practice, if I were to ask myself, what is my moral compass? Like, what I'm relying that on, like what determined the sense of right and wrong for me. Um, and again, I didn't really think much about this subject until I started practicing um, Buddhism, practicing the five precepts, and start educating myself. So further definition of those two is honesty, integrity, respect, and loyalty are an example of ethical belief, ethical idea. These are ethical idea. Not lying, being generous, being patient, and being loyal are example of moral precept. And so when I would learn about these two, about morality and ethic, and I learned about the philosophy, the ethical philosophy behind it, which is it's the ontology by Kantian, and the other one is utilitarian, I believe. Yeah, I I wonder where Buddhism fit into that, and was there ever a crossover? So in Kant moral theory, which is the ontology, it's based on the idea that morality is defined by duty and reason. Kant believed that people often act rationally and respect the right of others, regardless of their personal circumstances. And so morality for Kant is based on following absolute moral law, regardless of circumstances. This means that there's a universal moral law that we uphold regardless of what the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So we don't focus on the consequences. We don't focus on the cause. We know that this is rule that we follow, and to follow this rule is what considered good and moral and what is just. And so the comparison between Buddhism and Immanuel Kant moral theory emphasize ethical behavior. A key difference lies in their focus. Buddhism leans heavily on cultivating virtuous character to practice like mindfulness and compassion, while aligning more with virtue ethic, whereas Kant theory center on following universal moral law based on reason, prioritize goodwill as the foundation of ethical action, making his approach more rule-based and deontological. And the focus is different. In Buddhism, the focus is on character versus in Kantian is focused on action. Buddhism prioritizes developing virtuous character to practice that cultivate compassion and understanding, while Kant place emphasis on morality of action itself, determined by whether it adhere to universal principle. And the concept of self, right? So Buddhism emphasized the interconnectedness of all being, the illusion of separate self, while Kant viewed individual as an autonomous moral agent with inherent worth. And when I think of these concepts, well, it's pretty fascinating. Sometimes we rationalize our decision making, why we do what we do, and based on Kant theory here, there is a universal law that we follow, and sometimes even if circumstances dictate that we should do something else, we should not, because it will go against this law, and that make us immoral. And I think we can think of, I think it would be fun if we can think of idea of what a scenario like that would be. So the opposite of Immanuel Kant moral theory is the utilitarian, which is a consequentialist theory, just action based on their outcome, aiming to maximize overall happiness or utility, emphasize prioritize consequences of action over the action itself. So moral utilitarian morality is based on choosing action that produce the greater good for the greater number of people. This is where like the mean justify the end, right? Like whatever it takes to get the result we want, and the result that produce the maximum uh, sense of happiness, maximum result. So we can even make sacrifices that may go against the moral rule, the universal moral rule that Kent is talking about. But as long as it produces uh, the maximum amount of happiness. So like one of the common scenario is that can we kill one person to save million of people? And according to the utilitarian approach, yes. Well, I think so. I mean, based on their theory, but based on Kant theory, is no, because there is a moral law that dictate we cannot. Uh, that the person is the mean, it's the end in itself. Very interesting if you think about it, how often we think about how, how deep this moral concept can be. Um, so while both Buddhism and utilitarian aim to promote well-being, Buddhist ethic are primarily considered a form of virtue ethic, focus on cultivating inner quality like compassion, mindfulness to achieve enlightenment, whereas utilitarian is a consequential theory that prioritizes action that produce the greater overall happiness for the most people, often without much emphasis on character of individual performing the action. In both Buddhism and utilitarian, their approach is to reduce suffering. Reduce suffering, promote well-being, although the approach to achieve this goal is different. Impartiality. Both systems encourage a degree of impartiality in moral decision making. Consider the need of all individuals without favoritism. And Buddhist perspective, in faced with a choice to have to save the scenario I mentioned earlier, a person or one person or many, Buddhists might prioritize saving most people, but their motivation will be driven by compassion and or being involved. In the same scenario, utilitarian would also likely choose to save the most people, but the decision would primarily be based on the cultivation of maximizing overall happiness. So the focus is on consequences, while Buddhism is on character building, um, motivation for action. I think I read too much here. So when I would going through this thing, what I was thinking about, I was thinking about one part, what um, a lot of people. Well, I'll just speak about men that had been convicted of crime and been incarcerated. It's almost like it's a level of rationalization to me, and I'm just speaking for myself here. I mean, the concept of right and wrong, where does that come from? It vary, but at the root of it is, we should not cause harm to other. We should we should do things that, like the golden rule. We don't want people. We do thing to other that, we don't want other to do to us, right? That was the idea. That's like the moral understanding or reasoning that I had. So when I came into prison, it's almost like I was on Kantian theory. There's this rule, the universal rule, and then I learned to, okay, I can adjust those rules based on the circumstances. I always base my decision on something that is external. when I start studying Buddhism, and I understand the importance of understanding your own mind, working with yourself, building your own sense of character, practicing virtuous conduct is really a practice of cultivating oneself to be a person that does not steal, does not lie, does not take advantage of other, does not harm. Because there will time that I will not steal and lie when consequences arise in my mind. I don't want to face the consequences, so I choose not to do that. Or that there is a universal rule that I follow, but how often is that become mindful to me or at the front of my mind before I make the decision? I have to work on transforming myself. I have to cultivate the moral, the precept, the moral conduct, not so much because it's a set of rules that I have to follow, because it provides a sense of well-being, and it alleviates shame and guilt from doing otherwise, and it creates harmony. So all this realization started coming to me, and at the same time I was studying this philosophy, and and I think about this a lot. It's almost every day in our life we face an ethical decision, right? I'm a dog trainer, so I have, sometimes I work with very difficult, challenging dogs. Just a week ago, I was called, I was contacted by a rescue who had a foster. This couple decided to foster this dog straight from the shelter. The dog was placed on the euthanasia list, 48 hours left to die. This couple went and picked up the dog and took the dog home. And right when they took the dog home, the dog became very aggressive. No one can come near the dog, try to attack the man multiple times. And so they were sending me video of how the foster was interacting with this dog, and a lot of the choices that the foster did aggravated the dog, make the dog even more aggressive, and so he basically was trying to use the treat and reason with the dog. And so they will refer to me, they contact me, and they have me come down there and and evaluate the dog. The moment I came down there, because I work with this kind of dog, the first thing that I told him to do is to muzzle this dog. Now, some people think it's terrible to muzzle a dog, right? To put a muzzle onto a dog is not right. It's, they have this sense of right and wrong. But at that moment, I'm looking at the consequences. It would not be right and wrong, right, if that dog is allowed to attack someone and hurt that person, and in the cell place, it basically just sign its own death sentence when it does that. And so when I came, I put a muzzle on the dog, and I work with the dog, and now the dog don't need to be on the muzzle. The dog is completely fine. It licked my face. It's normal. And so the approach to this particular dog, who is in fight or flight, this dog is it's in survival mode. It's incapable of thinking. It's incapable of rationalizing. It cannot see that these people are, caring for it. But these fosters, they're just full of compassion. They just look at this dog as a dog that was surrendered by a family, by the way, and find itself in a situation where it's going to get killed just because it's struggling to adjust in a shelter environment. So they just full of compassion, and they want to pour this love, would pour out their love to this dog, give it as much freedom and privileges as the dog need, but not knowing that the dog don't. That's not what the dog need at the moment. The dog need a period of transition. He need a compression period so that he no longer in that state of survival. And so working with dog, I understand that what they need. And so I take the dog, I muzzle the dog, I crate the dog, I let the dog out only for a period of time. And that time is very intentional. What am I teaching the dog when I do this? These are the necessary steps that I take in order to get the dog to a place I need it to be. Now, I don't use any treat. I don't use any encouragement. I focus on the mental state of the dog. And the other, sometimes I think too, if you guys are a dog owner, does everyone here think that their dog have a sense of right and wrong? You ever catch your dog do something wrong and you look at them and they have this guilty look on their face? Does anyone here relate with that? Like the ear go back and they have this sad eye and they might lift their paw, and you look at that, it just spells guilty. And so a lot of people like, yeah, my dog know right and wrong. The dog have a moral compass or something. They know things that they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. And I always laugh at that when I have clients that tell me, oh, my dog is mad at me, that's why he pee on the sofa. I'm like, what did you do? What did you do for the dog? Oh, I didn't give him the food. Yesterday he was being demanding. I didn't give him the food. Today he never pee on the sofa. Today he pee on the sofa. And I know because when I caught him, he looked very guilty. And studies have shown that it's not that dog feel guilty. It's just that they are anticipating punishment, or they're anticipating a displeasure response from the owner. And naturally, they show sign of appeasement, and it look guilty to us. Their feature and posture. And then I thought about when we think about Kantian, when we think about utilitarian approach, their emphasis on human. But when you think about ethic or morality, ethic, moral in Buddhism, it's encompasses all being. We're supposed to treat them more, with compassion, all sentient being. That's including dog, even if they don't have a sense of right and wrong. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have a end point to what I'm thinking. Something I just thought of really quick because I know I have to give a talk, but I think it gives us a lot of food for thought. And I would like to just open up to a big, group, and that we can discuss, whatever it is that come up for you. If there's a question, maybe that will help me. If you have a question, maybe I can pull it out of my head and answer you, and then I'll make it what I'm sharing more coherent to you. But yeah, I would like to do that now. If can you just end the recording?